This episode of Back to the Roots podcast is brought to you by Byron Seeds. The folks at Byron Seeds believe organic requires a different perspective, plan, and approach. Organic isn't simply a different type of product or even a different way of farming. It's a different way of thinking, planning, commitment. It's a different philosophy on how to feed the world. Many won't understand, but the people at Byron Seeds do. We're owned by organic dairy farmers. We not only have the product, but we plan, manage, and execute organic. We speak your language, we share your struggles, and we laud your successes. Organic isn't a way of doing business, it's a community. We learn from each other. We're in this together. We'd be glad to talk cropping plans, management systems, the road to profitability. We understand what you're trying to do. We're farmers just like you. Visit us at byronseeds.net or give us a call at 800-801-3596. And thanks to Byron Seeds. Back to the Roots podcast is brought to you by Soil Biotics. Efficient is Soil Biotics fish emulsion-based liquid organic fertilizer additive. This product is a rich source of nutrients that slowly break down and release nitrogen into the soil. It is an excellent food source for soil microbes and helps relieve plant stress in the event of drought, heat, and excessive water conditions. To learn more about Efficient, visit soilbiotics.com or call 815-929-1752.
You're listening to Back to the Roots podcast. I'm Mike Klein, and along with Brian Wood, we are in Curtis, Washington, sitting down with Maynard, Mallonee, and his son Jack. Thank you guys so much for taking the time to sit down with us. We're excited to be out in Washington for the first time, so thanks for taking the time. And Maynard, can you give us a little bit of an introduction and a little bit of history on your farm here?
Sure. Well, welcome to Washington, Mike and Brian. And so I am a third generation organic dairy farmer. My grandfather purchased this land in 1949. Our grade A milk permit number is still the same number that my grandfather had. The state has just passed it along to us, so that's a really cool thing here on the farm. We farm a couple hundred acres here, about 100 of it's irrigated. And we also rent a couple hundred acres of ground that we grow for forage.
Mm-hmm. And Jack, what is your role here?
I do everything, but mainly feed the calves, work on equipment, robot maintenance, and then just every bookkeeping, and then general day-to-day things that need to get done.
I see.
So just so people know, Jack is my 22-year-old oldest son. He's decided to come back to the farm and hopefully take over and make it the fourth generation. And maybe, you never know, we can get a fifth generation going there. So
All pressure.
Oh, all the pressure. The third generation's the hardest, though. That's the lowest percentage comeback is the third.
Oh, really?
That is like the proven thing is once you get past the third, it gets a little easier.
So you did the hard one.
apparently, well, I'm not quite. I haven't met the goal line yet, but we're gonna get there.
Mm-hmm. How many cows do you milk?
We currently milk about 55 to 60 cows with a robotic milker.
Mm-hmm.
Do 200 plus days of pasture at 80+% dry matter intake. So we're like pasture. It's my belief that pasturing your cows like that tends to put more money in your bottom line. It is hard work, takes a lot of learning, and we're constantly, trying to read and look up stuff on how we can get more milk per acre. I think that's one of the problems in the United States is people think about milk per cow. Everybody wants to know, I'm getting 25,000 pounds per cow. I'm doing this great job. but I'm going broke. It's more about the Australian, the like Kiwi down under theory is how much milk per acre am I getting out of my cows. And I think that's what people need to start kind of, especially an organic farmer, you need to really think on, how I can get more per every acre I own, because the price of land is just going through the roof. So if we can grow different crops, do different stuff, and just tweak what we're doing and always advance, I think we're going to be better in the long run.
And can you give a little picture? I mean, we had a chance to drive up here, and I know driving in, we were a little bit like, where are we going? We're going up into the mountains, or what are we doing here? Can you give a picture of like where you sit and in this valley? I assume like a mountain valley. What elevation are we at? That kind of stuff.
So virtually, the farm is located halfway between Seattle, Washington, and Portland, Oregon. So we're 90 miles from each. So driving time about an hour and a half. We are about an hour to an hour and a half from the Pacific Ocean, which is west of us. But that's also separated by a mountain range, which the mountain closest to us is 3,200 feet tall. So we get a lot of the Pacific storms right now. Today, as we look out the windows, we sit here, we're getting what they call the atmospheric river, or the Pineapple Express. So it swirls around over Hawaii, gets warm, and generally is pointed at Washington. But for the poor guys in California, unfortunately, last couple weeks, it's been pointed down there, and it's inundated the state of California with water. So the valley where I live is virtually a north-south valley. It's about 1.5 miles wide, a couple mountains on each side. So as you drive down, there's one road, and beautiful farm ground, beautiful river bottom with a river running through it. Most of us have irrigation rights out of the river. A lot of the rivers have the 4 major species of salmon, steelhead in them, and trout. So we're farming at the same time protecting salmon and steelhead by leaving buffer zones and stuff like that.
You also said it best, though, when you pulled in. You're just driving, and then you come over a hill, and it opens up, and it's farms. That's pretty much what our valley is. You just drive and drive. You're in the middle of nowhere. Then you come over a hill. On both sides, there's a hill. You come over the hill, and then it opens up into farms.
Yeah, because we were driving. It was nothing but trees on either side, going up and up and up, and then down and down and down, and all of a sudden, there it was.
Yeah, so actually where we live is like we have our own little microclimate. So compared to the nearest town, which is 20 miles away, we can be 10 degrees colder, but we can also be 10 degrees hotter. So we have this own special little like microclimate, which allows us to, in my opinion, grow some stuff that other people can't grow, and or not grow stuff that other places can't grow, which you have to adapt to that environment.
You mentioned that you're a third-generation organic farmer. So your grandpa and your dad farmed organically?
So my grandfather, when he started in 49, actually came to the farm, bought the farm. It was a old style, Thai-style barn, put milk in cans. He actually worked off the farm as the milk truck driver. So he would come home. My mom and her 4 sisters would help milk the cows, do the work a little bit. He would do the work, go to work. And then my grandfather was never a believer in conventional agriculture. He just believed that Mother Nature, if you worked with Mother Nature, provided you the means of making milk or a product that I believe was good for the consumer. So we never used Roundup, we never used 2,4-D, we didn't even use commercial fertilizer when it was free. People would stop by and they're like, "Can we just go spread this on your farm?" He's like, "Don't even come on my farm with that stuff. I'm not going to go there." He just used the manure and what he believed was, I guess, holistic in raising his family and raising, everybody, and that's the way it's my mother's side of the family. So my dad came into that, started working when he was like 12 years old here at the farm. He would ride his bicycle up here. Actually, Jack lives in the house where my dad grew up at. So it's like 5 miles down the road. He'd ride his bike here, and his mom would call and say, "Is John coming home? He needs to come home today," and he'd have to get on his bike and head out because he just loved to farm. Ended up having the opportunity to come back and, be a farmer, and he just loved it.
Mm-hmm. And when did you take over the farm?
So 2016.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
So, what happened was my dad milked the cows, went home, had a heart attack, passed away, and the next day started the learning curve of taking over a farm without a set of eyes on your farm. So when I lost my dad, I lost a set of eyes, I lost a person. It was kind of hard.
Mm-hmm. I can imagine just being just thrown into it like that.
Yeah, so my excuse me. So my mom actually said she would work for 6 months, and so we had this. So in 1960, my grandfather made the decision to go away from the tie stall barn and put up a step-up parlor. So like a parlor, like the parlors like we have today, where the cows are elevated. You walked in on a flat floor, the cows are above you. He was actually the first farmer in the county to put that in. The same year, he also built his first loafing shed to house the cows out of tie stall system into a, I guess what we call today a freestall system. So he implemented both that in 1960 and kind of lit the fire in the county as far as let's go look at Lawrence's thing, and then everybody started building that style. So he kind of led the story as an innovator.
Mm-hmm.
And then to lead that on, so we milked in that same parlor up until 2016. So according to the numbers, we milked about 6 million cows in that parlor. That probably cost about $5,000.
So it was probably paid for.
Probably. So my mother, my grandfather, my grandmother, my mother, and my father never milked in anything besides a milking parlor, except when they had the tie stall barn prior to the parlor. So the thing was dilapidated. It was beat up. It had milked 6 million cows. No longer had my dad. My mom wanted to retire. And the De La Val guy came by, and he's like, have you ever thought about a robot? It's on sale this month for $50,000 off. And I said, give me those numbers. We'll look up some stuff. And can I do it with one person? And the guy's like, you could probably do it with one person. Might take a lot of work. So December of that year, I signed the contract. In May 16th, 2017, we milked the cows for the last time in the parlor, flipped the switch on the robot, and we have never looked back since. Probably was the best investment I'd ever made. Was it expensive? Yes, it was. Was it hectic? Yes, it was. Stressful? Yes, it was. But in the long run, I think it's really going to work. And, Jack can chime in on that.
Oh, it's definitely worth it, but it's still stressful. It's always going to be stressful. There'll be weeks. It was Thanksgiving about that week that we spent 3 days nonstop with issues, and the one day it got 10 degrees all day long. The milk froze in the thing when the computer decided to shut down for the day. So once we get the computer problem fixed, after Dad's on the phone with the guy in somewhere on the East Coast, and we're working, and they were like, why won't it pump milk to the tank? I was like, well, the line's got to be frozen. Sure enough, he's like, no, it's not frozen. I was like, okay, we're going to take it apart. And then just slushy milk flows out of the line. And then, so it's still stressful, but it's definitely easier. We're definitely doing a lot more than what we could do milking cows, the two of us. And I think we're evolving just from that, being able, now we're comfortable with it. We've got most of the kinks worked out, and we're moving on to different things that are going to help the farm evolve.
And as part of what drove you in the first place to look at the robot, essentially that you were the sole man at that point, and were you milking 50, 60 cows at that point?
Yeah, we were still milking the same level of cows. And I looked at it, priced it out. I could have built a parlor for maybe a little bit less, but the price of the parlor, because the old parlor, 6 million cows, 1960 to 2016, it was done. Everything was done. It would have been a total gut, total rebuild, everything new. And then I'm like, okay, but if I put in the robot and I get it working right, I can go watch Jack play football. I can go watch Jack do wrestling. I can go to track meets. I can take off these little windows of opportunities of time for your family to actually go do that stuff that most farmers never have, because if it's milking time at 5 o'clock and Jack has a track meet at 5 o'clock, I don't go. So now you're like, okay, the thing is, as long as it's working great, you can take off these little windows of time and, go to those things, hoping that your phone doesn't go off and say, oh, the robot shut down, because there's no at that time there was no backup for me. So all of a sudden we started to go be able to do more stuff like family wise, leave the farm, for a little while, do stuff like that. And then as you evolve, you're like, it's better for your cows because there's no human stress on the cows. Okay. In my opinion, the worst stress on those cows is when you run them all into a pen and somebody's there trying to harvest milk from them. And if they're angry that day, that anger goes through their arms into the cow, and the cow is angry. Okay. The robot does the same thing over and over, has no attitude, has nothing. It just harvests milk. As long as it's working right, it harvests milk. Yeah, are there glitches? Yes, there are. But, if it's running good, it can be a really good situation. That's, and the cows love it. My girls love the thing. They go in there. They're just like, I'll sit here and no human comes in that door. No human bugs me. And it's good.
And have you been on the farm since day one of the robot?
I was a senior in high school when the robot first got put in, and then I went to college for 2 years, and then COVID hit. So I've been here 3 of the years for the robot pretty much.
Okay.
But definitely now with the 2 people, we can, especially taking time off, we can conquer and divide, if I go do something for 2 or 3 days, or Dad wants to go to a conference or something, it's a lot easier. He can say, I'm going to be gone, say 2 weeks in advance, and then goes and does it. There's no like, oh, you got to stay and milk cows. There's, I can scrape the barn and roll the bales, and that's easy.
Part of bringing the next generation back is showing that there's some flexibility in the lifestyle of farming.
Especially now with, like you said earlier, people can make a lot more with better schedules off the farm. You got to figure out a way where you can have a decent schedule and a family life outside of farming, especially dairy farming. That's hard for people to see. Nobody today wants to stand there and milk cows for 6 hours of the day and then not have any time to do anything else.
I know a couple of people I think do.
They're few and far between.
They're rare breeds.
Yeah, rare breeds of people.
That's my brother Tim always says that cows bring you home from places you'd rather not be. So, that's him. So had you always kind of planned on coming back to the farm when you left for college?
Yeah, that was always the plan. I went to college to get a degree in agriculture, focused on it, worked for a guy who did dairy stuff. He had a big dairy feedlot. He made cheese, so it was all dairy related. And then when COVID hit, it was kind of the point, like, came home, worked a little, and then I was like, yeah, this is what I want to do. I can apply my degree, and I can see it going, like, farther.
Nice.
Yeah, so I think actually, as far as like the farm succession goes, with people milking cows, robotics is the way to bring the next generation along. Even if you're milking 60 cows, where you don't have to go there every morning at 5 o'clock and every night at 5 o'clock, or every time you don't have to be there every day at boom, boom, boom. Like when we're doing like silage season, and if that robot's working good, you just go there, do what you need to do, the bare minimum, and we're out making silage, or we're out making hay, or we're farming when we need to be farming. Where before it's like, okay, let's shut everything down for 2 or 3 hours, and then do you really want to start back up and go again, or do you really just want to go in and go to bed, type deal? So we've done a lot to where we're farming when we used to be milking.
And I think our production of hay and our quality of feed has gone up that much more because we have time to make hay when it's perfect conditions, not, oh, I can't do it today because I got to do this in town, and then I got to milk the cows and this and that. You have time to go make the hay, and you can only do that if everything else is working right. And then we've also done none of our fields had ever been plowed before 2016, I don't think. If you can believe that. So since 1960 till 2017, none of the fields had ever been plowed.
Wow.
So we were living, my grandfather was not a crop farmer. He was more of a dairy farmer, and crop farming, I mean here on our farm personally, you're a forage farmer. Because that's what we believe in by the heavy use of pasturing. We grow all our own forage. We don't bring in any forage. And so we were living on old varieties of grasses, forbs, legumes. So especially a couple of the fields, they were full of Kentucky 31 fescue.
And they were so rough. I mean, lumps and bumps and 2 foot, like, the rolls of the big lumpy grass. You could barely walk through them.
I mean, the balls of the 31 fescue were the size of basketballs. So when we started working that ground up and, learning how to, use different variety of crops, so, to kill off that 31 fescue, the only way to do that here in Washington is you got to work it in like May and June when it starts getting hot, flip it up, let the roots dry, but you don't want to put a grass crop back in because it's going to outcompete it. So we've started using like brassicas, like T-Raptor, turnips, sorghum Sudan grass, a bunch of summer annuals. Take those summer annuals and smother that thing to death. Crop it out. Put that in, let our cows graze that off or harvest it as silage, and then come back in the fall and no-till drill your grasses and your clovers, your chicory, your plantain, your multi, 10 plus species of stuff that we need to have as organic farmers, and make a biodiversity crop that our cows love. So we've really worked hard the last 5 years and not carving up the whole place at once. So we work in little plots, like 5 acres, 10 acres, and we'll go in, make a plan, summer annual at Brassica, do something, and just turn that ground into what was, marginal ground into some really successful, like I say, more milk per acre grass.
And compaction. Compaction around here, we get 70 inches of rain a year usually, and compaction's probably a huge issue just from rainfall. And like you said about loving to milk the cows, just plowing a field is a great thing. I love that. But we're definitely no-till people too. Like, we definitely like the no-till, what it brings to the table, but just plowing is probably changed how our farm operates from just getting compaction out, turning over roots, adding organic matter back in, and then staying with the sustainable soil practices that people are really going after, the no-till and adding organic matter back.
Mm-hmm.
And we do soil test every year for our nutrient management plan, but we also soil test because with all that water here in Washington, we need to add, like every year we're adding gypsum to our fields because all the sulfur is washed out. So we're adding gypsum. So we have 20 pounds of sulfur, which adds to, photosynthesis in the grasses, really makes the clovers pop. So it's virtually, if you fertilize with gypsum, it's like fertilizing with nitrogen. Your field will turn green in a week. I mean, it's amazing how it works. You give the ground that sulfur, but we're also learning if we plant the brassicas, which are scavengers of sulfur out of the air naturally, our soil, by soil sampling now, where our sulfur levels are coming up, and our organic matter is like, we've had fields 12% organic matter.
Oh, wow.
So we're really starting to see like a biological growth within our own fields by what we're doing.
Mm-hmm. And are you still in the process of turning over everything, or have you done all the fields that you said in 2000?
We're still in the process, but I think this year we're going to take some bigger chunks and redo them. Because really we want to shoot, especially moving forward, making more milk and making more money. You got to have better grass, and the key to that is we're going to have to change it up and plow some under and put some new in.
The experiment what started as somewhat of an experiment has proven it works.
It's working, and we're going to take it to the next level moving forward.
Yep.
So we're actually using some ideas that have come out of like the Midwest, where you're like a Ohio farmer, an Indiana farmer, where you're using these summer annuals. So when it gets hot here in Washington, we can go from like last year, horribly wet spring, and it just quits raining like July the 1st. It doesn't rain again for 90 days. 0. We got 0, and it gets over 100. So we went from 0, and then the ground, when it gets hot here, it'll start baking the top of it, makes a layer. And part of my ground is irrigated, part of it isn't. So we need to have plants, species that'll live on my dryland ground and my irrigated ground that can have tap roots that are deeper rooted. And I'm starting to learn like a bunch of stuff, like the chicory especially, and the plantain, meadow fescue, like the fescue varieties have deeper roots versus ryegrass or orchard grass. So when it gets 100 here, all that other stuff slows down. All of a sudden I'm like, man, I got to be out there grazing my chicory and my meadow fescue every 18 days because it's going crazy. It loves the heat. So just adapting to climate change and, everything like that, that's been a growing curve for the farm.
Mm-hmm.
And using some more annuals, because no experience with any type of annuals really. And then like last year we did some sunflowers and some turnips, like mixed and stuff like that. So I think the annual plants will add a new diversity that we can grow off of. So we're going to plant we know our varieties we like and stuff that we're going to evolve that way, but then some still experiments of smaller things to see some like specific annuals that we can hit target goals with.
Because you would get the heat units for like a sorghum Sudan?
Yeah, there was a farmer. So I was the first farmer to ever experiment with sorghum Sudan. Everybody's like, you got to try it. So I had some rental ground that was run by a vegetable farmer, full of weeds, full of vegetables, full of everything. And I'm like, what do I plant in this field to clean it up? So we planted sorghum Sudan, straight, monocultured it, and made it into silage only. And it smothered every plant out. It would get 3 to 4 feet tall. We would cut it, silage. I think we got 3 cuttings that year. Went in the fall when it died out, and no-till drilled grass and clover through it. But another farmer then called me up the next year and says, hey, Maynard, what do I plant in this field? I'm like, sorghum Sudan. I go, you want to one cut it, or do you want to try to get more? He goes, I'll just go for one. So he put it in a field. put some manure water on it, and he got 15 ton to the acre yield.
Wow.
It's done really good around here if you have irrigation for it, it does great. And even without irrigation, we did a test plot of it. It got like 4 feet tall, and there was 1 inch of rain. So it does really good around here.
Because we have guys doing the same thing, no-tilling into that sorghum Sudan, then with a fall seeding, because you get that good, nice, solid seed bed, and a no-till drill works really well.
It works great for that. Yep.
So you do graze that sometimes?
Yes, we have grazed it before.
Okay.
Yeah, you just have to be really careful that it doesn't get ahead of you. And I was told that by some Midwest farmers, as well as some farmers in like Oregon and stuff, that you strategically go in there faster and get it down, because it'll outgrow your cows.
Yeah, because if you have a decent sized field and you start at 30 inches tall in the front, you'll lose the cows at the back end of the field in about 10 days.
Yeah, so the boys called it like, grass on crack. That's how fast it grows. I mean, it'll put up a little curl that you think the leaf is coming, and the next day the leaf's 6 inches tall. And it just grows. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's the summer annual, because in my region there's hardly any irrigation. So we have that really hot summer slump, and the summer annuals, especially sorghum Sudan, is used to get that pasture so that basically the dry matter intake does not dip through the summer slump, because they're usually night grazing when it's really hot. Night grazing in sorghum Sudan, you can get about 55 to 60% dry matter just by night grazing in a sorghum Sudan, which is especially for grass mill farmers, something to renovate pastures in the rotation. You need some kind of a summer annual, because especially if you're using alfalfa, you can't just tear it up and go back in with alfalfa. It won't work. So that summer annual has so many benefits.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that I think a lot of West Coast farmers have never learned, because we were always just grass. You got to plant orchard grass. You got to plant ryegrass. You got to plant, grass. Well, they never have used a summer annual rotation, and ryegrass is good until like July, and then you're done. You're done till September. Or same with orchard grass. You're good. And then everybody's like, oh, fescue's not a good crop. And I'm like, no, you got to go with the newer varieties, the soft tall fescues, the meadow fescues, the blends, and then plant that with the ryegrass in a blend. So the ryegrass is great in the spring. Then the meadow fescue and the fescues take over. And if you put some, clovers in there with it and some herbs, and lay that all out, you're blending your field for the year. That's something that we need to learn better, and learning from some guys in the Midwest or the Southeast on what are we planting oats? Maybe you need to plant those in July versus in April, or triticale, or these crops that can get you through when it's hot, that love the heat. Where our grasses out west are just like, they peter out. They're like gone. So it's we're experimenting with some like rape and kale and turnip crosses, and basically just laying out these little plots of like 2 acre plots of like Jackal, like, I'm gonna go hop on the plow and plow me a 2 acre plot, work it up in a week, because he is right. He does love plowing. He really.
Yeah.
I tell you what, doing a nice job of plowing is like, especially if you get a really good turnover and it's clean, there's no green stuff sticking up. And by the way, if you can drive straight, it makes it look even better.
Oh,
well, Mike, let's just say he's learning that experience.
Well, we struggle with our sod, and then we have some places with big reed clumps and stuff, so some of it just doesn't turn over. And even if you get a great like plow turn, you can go disc it over the top, and then giant clumps of grass are coming up, and you're like, oh well.
Yeah.
He did though go ask an old school farmer up the road, and this guy, he just passed away last year, but he was in his 80s, and he could lay out a field better with the plow than a guy with the GPS. I mean, the guy was incredible. His rows were straight, no dead furrows, no nothing. I've always been amazed with him. I've known him since I was born. And so I told Jack, I go, hey, just go talk to Dan and see what Dan has to tell you. And we're plowing with a 2-bottom moldboard plow that my grandpa bought. So nothing fancy. Just go and bury that thing as deep as it can go is basically the theory,
But it hadn't been used in 60 years at that point.
It's practically brand new. In reality, we borrowed a disc to do a little bit from our neighbor, and we still borrow it here and there. But the one plow and the one disc we have, we pulled the disc out of the barn that was just in a bunch of dust, and we pulled the plow out of the barn, and then the disc, a tree had grown through it. So we went and cut the tree down, and then we pulled the disc out and just started using it.
Add a little bit of grease and you were ready to go.
Yes, pretty much.
I bought a 3-bottom Converland plow here a number of years ago with the long twisted moldboard, and it is unbelievable how nice that thing plows. I mean, it doesn't throw it over, because with the long moldboard, it's twisted, so it just lays it over it. And I tell you what, chopping corn is the only thing more fun than plowing.
We don't grow any corn.
I know.
But we do need to get a plow that would. Ours is not as curved as that one. We have a International one, so it's more of a dirt plow, but it works good.
Well, International actually used to use the Converland bottoms on their older plows, which Converland is out of Austria, I think.
Austria.
And they are known for winning the plowing competitions. I know you can get bottoms to put on that fit International, like Converland bottom for an International plow.
We might have to look into it.
I know Pioneer Equipment in our region, which they're selling the ag side of their business. They're selling, but you used to be able to get all those plow parts from them.
Yeah, we've always looked at the Converlands, but every time we want one at an auction, as soon as we want it, the price just goes through the roof, and the boys are like, "Do we really need to plow that bad? Ours works okay." And I'm like, "It's up to you, man. Ours might be Converland bottom. This is from like 1972."
Mm-hmm. I found my first one in a junkyard in Kentucky for $300, and then I sold that, and I found this one. There was still on the I can't think of what it's called, the little cover board that supposedly knocks off the edge and knocks off the green chunks.
Oh, the mold board?
On top of it, it's got the little angled cover board.
Okay.
There was still paint on it. So this old grandpa bought it, and it had been sitting in the barn for 40 years. So I bought that. I paid $1,600 for it, but it's a 3-bottom 14-inch, which is perfect for doing small fields.
Yeah, I think we're pulling a 2-bottom 18.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
So it'll plow about 10 inches deep.
Okay. You'll sink that thing in.
With the right ground. Our ground's pretty hard. We can get it about 8, but it could go a little deeper with some soft ground.
Mm-hmm. So to switch gears a little bit, we had talked earlier today when we got here about, you've got kind of a succession plan going on with you and Jack. Can you expound on that a little bit, on what your plans are going forward?
Jack had taken a class with a guy named Andy Junkin, and then he gifted me a class with Andy. So we listened to it, and basically after listening to this class, it's like a lot of the farms, Jack will say, gets to the 3rd generation, and that's the dead end. There's nothing past there.
And there's a lot of logic behind that too. How it's explained is the first person starts it, then they have to work and build it up, and then the 2nd generation takes it over, and they still have to build it up. But then you get to the point where all the barns are built, all the stuff is in place, and then the 3rd generation comes in, and what are you doing? But I think Dad crossed that hump by putting in the robot, changing things up. Because if you get to the 3rd and you don't change, you're not going forward anymore. And if you're not going forward, you're going to go out of business because you got to keep changing. And that's really the key is you get to the 3rd generation and maybe we're still at the same amount of cows really, but maybe you're at 500 cows or 700 cows. And then are you going to add more cows? What are you going to change to keep the farm growing? Because once you get to the second generation, you normally have 2 incomes you got to work off of and all that stuff. So things get a lot more complex in that fact of just growing and continuing.
Mm-hmm.
And then, Jack does have a younger brother and a younger sister, so we have to take them into consideration. They both, are still on the farm, still growing up. So, how do we treat them fairly? But I think the best is to just, make some type of a plan, and, me don't be stubborn and him don't be stubborn, and, everybody just hopefully get together on the same page. And, because the amount of money he would have to pay me would never be affordable in today's market. And I really, want to see it moving forward. So how do I do that? And still, have to have some type of retirement. Like you say, Mike, we were talking earlier, the Amish community, they take care of their mother and father, no matter what. Mm-hmm. They're not on Social Security. They're not on all this other stuff, but that's part of taking over the farm if you take over the farm. So is that something me and Jack need to talk about? Probably we do. But as long as everything's on the table, I think you're good. It's when everybody's not at the table that it's bad.
Mm-hmm. And succession can be a really beautiful and easy thing. It can be an ugly, messy thing too. But I think that, like you said, putting everything on the table and talking your way through it, there's always going to be disagreements because you are, after all, family.
Well,
Okay.
yeah, and if you don't put it on the table early enough and then you're stressed about it instead of, we got enough time to actually figure things out instead of, well, I want to retire tomorrow and this is what needs to happen.
And I can say from my mom's perspective, so when my grandfather passed away, his will just said we'll divide the farm by 5 people. My mom was one of those 5. And her sisters decided that they would put her through the most painful part of wanting to remain here. And she chose to remain.
I see.
So she actually had to buy them off. So she could have just said, I'm done, walk away, and this place would have been sold. But she chose not to.
Well, and usually that's the end of a farm when
Right.
it's split up 5 ways because agriculture can't afford to pay.
Right.
Hasn't typically been able to afford to pay.
Right. And back then, I guess they were lucky because my dad wasn't working on the farm then. He was actually a surveyor, and he'd went to work in Alaska and made a pretty healthy amount of money. So they had a pretty good pool, but it still was really, that choice was made over a lawyer in court.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And what are the land prices like in this valley?
Well, when you drive down the valley to the north, there's 400 acres of blueberries now, just about. And that drove the price up probably a couple $1,000s an acre. But I'd say somewhere, depending on if you're irrigated or not, $8,000 to $10,000 an acre, depending on what you have. A lot of the ground out here can be just swamp, and that's not really worth anything. But the blueberry people probably bought all the prime land in the valley, except for the people way up the road. So,
And part of the deal out here also is because we are by the river, which allows us to have water. But that water has also become like gold. So the last number I knew, our value of water out of that river was about $4,000 an acre foot. If for that water right.
So you get X amount of gallons that you're allowed to pump out of the river?
Correct.
So it is metered.
It's not metered yet, but
Okay.
one day it will. The river is, because of the salmon and specifically the salmon here in the Pacific Northwest, gets low flows in the summertime. The indigenous people and certain people in the government, trying to save orca whales and that stuff, believe in this certain beliefs that low flow is part of it. It's not metered yet, but one day it could be. And I have a specific water right for like 90 acre feet of water. So that's enough water to put 1 foot of water on 90 acres. That is worth about $4,000 an acre foot just for the water.
Just for the water.
So I could sell that. You can only sell it downstream. I could sell that if I wanted to ever give up irrigating to a municipality. I could sell it to an indigenous tribe that might want to build a water park. I could sell it to a land trust that would just say, we're retiring it and it's staying in stream. There's all these opportunities that you could do. But water out here where I live, especially when you don't get rain for 90 days, is gold.
Mm-hmm.
It's beyond gold.
So you're speaking another language to us that live
Yep.
in an area where water is just there.
Correct. But if climate ever changes, like for David Hirschberger, where he was in the rain shadow last year
Yep.
and got no rain, everybody else gets rain, all of a sudden his fields are drying up and he's feeding his winter feed in September or August, and he goes into winter low and you have to buy feed, which when you're buying feed, you're buying water.
Mm-hmm.
I don't every export bale that comes out of Washington here to China or Japan and China aren't buying alfalfa. They're buying water because we have water and they don't have water. So that's one way to look at it. When you're buying feed, you're not buying the feed. You're buying the water that made that feed. And people need to understand that as global warming or the world takes effect. Look at California now. They went from a drought 3 months ago to, they just said the Salinas Valley, where they grow 70% of the lettuce in the United States, is underwater. So if you want lettuce in 2 months, you might not have lettuce in the grocery store because
we'll have watercress instead. Huh?
so just that. So think about that. If you're Tim and you're Mike in your area, or Brian, where you live, okay, Mother Nature gives you water. What if she shuts it off one day?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Oh,
It's gold. It's what comes out of the sky is gold falling on you from nature. If Mother Nature decides to not give you gold, it's cannot be fun.
Well, and also we've been very fortunate to have many aquifers that can continue to water a lot of farm ground. But around here, you're primarily, can you walk through how that works? Like, let's just say I moved out here and bought 400 acres right next to you. I had no water rights, but I was trying to buy them, or I was trying to make sure I was able to irrigate my farm ground. How would I even go about that? How are those distributed? How does that work?
So if you do not have water rights out of the river and you are not grandfathered in, you will not get water. There are no water rights given anymore in the state of Washington. Those water rights that you're buying will be labeled on that farm, and they'll be labeled like how many acre feet or cubic inches a minute you can pump out of that river. And then a lot of them are junior water rights, so they're not like ours is. I think the year my grandfather moved here, they came through and everybody got their water right. So ours are like old, but underneath them there's like junior rights, which are lesser guys that applied in the 70s, maybe the 80s. Well, lately, come June, they're like, the state's like, there's no junior watering this year. No, you can't water for the last probably 5 years. So your water right is worth nothing. So you can't go apply, and because where we live out here, close to the ocean, the Columbia River and everything, if you drill a well over 80 feet, it's salt water. So there is no viable.
Because I was just going to ask, well, could you drill your own well? But you're hitting salt water over 80 feet.
Yeah, and we're talking flowable salt water. There's actually so our aquifer is salt.
Probably not great to irrigate with that.
No. And we're talking like salty ocean water, salt water type stuff.
Wow. I didn't realize there would be an aquifer that would be salt water.
It's actually flowing salt water. They say there's actually, it comes in from like the Columbia River, curls around through our valley here, how it's designed, and then goes back out down 20, 30 miles. So it's actually, there's a loop you can follow, and the whole loop is, you drill down 80 feet salt water.
Can you find fresh water well shallower than that?
No.
So where does your water for the house come from?
So ours, we're on the city water system, which is actually, they take it out of a naturally flowing stream, and then it's pumped into like a city water system.
Okay, so you have city water all the way out here.
Yeah, the guys in the 60s developed, they actually put a pipe up a stream. The water just flows into the pipe naturally, goes to a collection facility, and then it's treated.
Wow. Like the water rights thing to me is like it's so foreign, because we get where we get anything that comes, the storms that come off from the northwest is where we get most of our water. Is western end of Lake Erie, picks up the water, drops it on us. The other stuff coming from the Gulf, we get a little bit of that, but so we have multiple avenues where our moisture comes from. So in 1988 was the last real bad drought that we had. I remember I think we got 10 square bales, like the small, like 50-pound square bales off of 10 acres, second cutting, which was really not worth making, but we were desperate for hay. So the whole water rights thing, and there's a lot of areas in the United States that have water problems and are going to continue to have water problems. But it's fascinating to me because I don't know anything about it.
Mm-hmm.
You're lucky then.
I know.
It's a big problem out here.
Mm-hmm. So how far inland do you have to go before you can drill a well?
Well, and the thing is, a lot of the places, once you get out of here, the water rights have been like sold or taken away. So you can't actually, depends on which like river basin you're in, if they actually allow wells in those river basins to lower the aquifer.
Mm-hmm.
So water rights here in Washington State are it's virtually like a water war. And if you don't do it right, you will lose. Mm-hmm. You're not going to win. I mean, people go to school for water rights.
Really?
To be a lawyer for water rights only, yes.
Wow.
And bringing it back around to succession, is that part of the conversation that you guys have to have? Does that water right for this farm automatically transfer from you to Jack upon transfer of the farm, or do you have to?
Well, the water rights here go with the land. They're non-negotiable. They go with the land. And we could not farm without the water that we have. It'd be virtually impossible to not have irrigation during the summer and graze the cows like we do.
Mm-hmm. So if it stays with the land, how can you sell them?
The only way you could sell them is you could sell them off of your farm, but they have to go downstream. So you could sell them downstream, so it would have to leave your farm. So what Jack's saying is true. So, but if we want to be viable on this farm, that water needs to stay with this specific piece of ground. And you actually have to use that right. You can't just have it sit there on a piece of paper and not use it. So if you don't use it in 5 years, you lose it. And you have to have proof. So if the state government comes to you and says, show me proof that you've used your water right in the last 5 years, you got to have, how much electricity did you use on that thing? You probably should have how many days did I water, all these records that you don't have. And they went to people and said, show me your records. They don't have records. They take it.
So even if you're not doing anything and you have water rights, you're going to pump water.
Yeah, you pump water.
You
no
want to
matter
pump
what.
water. Yeah.
Yeah. Just because of the value of that, and your land without the water rights is going to plummet in value, isn't it?
Yes.
So if you're just growing whatever out there, you'll run water over that just to have the
Yep.
paper trail. Interesting.
I know I'm showing my ignorance in asking these questions, but like I said, this is a whole new. I mean, it's something that you guys deal with since you've started farming here.
Well, as I said, when you get on the West Coast and when we get dry, water is king.
Mm-hmm.
Water is gold. Water is king. To have that right, it's
Keeps you going.
yeah, it's money in the bank. Yeah, it's we start irrigating in May and we don't shut off till October.
We literally do not shut off till it starts raining again. Once it gets dry, like if we see it getting dry, water comes on and it goes till it starts raining.
How do you apply it?
We have the little sprinklers that you pull with the
the
Ranger,
K-line?
the K-line.
K-lines.
Yep. We put those in 2 years ago now.
Okay. You like them?
Yep. Dad drives around on the Ranger for about 2-3 hours and do the whole property that can be irrigated. We don't spend, that's another thing that we don't spend time doing now. We used to spend 3-4 hours moving hand lines and we do 3 fields. Now it takes them 3 hours and we do 6 fields. So that's a big time saver, and we grow a lot more grass that way too.
I'm sure.
Yeah, we've been known to take the one year I think we harvested eight cuttings of hay or silage off
Oh, wow.
some of our fields.
And is that like a 30-day cut? 28-day?
Yeah, we're going say
Depending on the year, 30 to 45 day
Okay.
cut. Just depends. There's a lot of factors that come into that.
Oh, yeah, no doubt.
And then lately we've been, if it's actually not tall enough to cut, we've actually been trying to get the cows in there a little faster. So going on the, using the cows versus burning diesel.
Because diesel is not cheap, and I don't think it's going to get cheap.
No, especially on the West Coast. That's another thing. It's more expensive out here than it is other places too. A lot of things are more expensive out here. Feed, diesel, fertilizer, compared to the Midwest and all that.
Yeah, so our speaking of that, our Christmas present from our governor and our current legislative branch was January 1st. We got a 46 cents fuel tax put on.
Oh.
For 46 cents a gallon for diesel and gas, so we can turn to clean green energy in this state.
That makes sense.
Merry
Why when
Christmas.
we were driving from Oregon this morning and I filled up for $3.29, and then we come up here and I mentioned to Mike,
Yeah.
oh, it's $4.39 here to fill up for gas. What in the world?
46 cents of that, effective January 1, was put in by our state governor and legislature.
And you pay that on farm too.
Yeah, our diesel costs this year went up. We paid about $2,000 in 2021. We went up to like $7,000 this year. And I think we actually used less diesel probably.
Wow. That's so the 46 cents is to develop green energy.
To develop clean green energy, yes.
And how is that going to benefit you?
The governor wants to turn all state vehicles electric.
Okay.
I mean, by 2035, they want all of Washington to be. They're not going to produce any gas engines in the state, just like California. So we follow California's clean energy laws.
How long will you be able to buy tractors that aren't electric?
Well, however long till they stop producing diesel ones.
I guess so.
That's why we're buying the old school ones we can still work on, Mike.
Oh, yeah. Yep. Well, this was really interesting, and it's really exciting for me to see that succession plan talk happening while you're both young, When it goes down the road for so long, all of a sudden you're sitting here in limbo, like what's going on, and I think that's really exciting to see. So, and it was really great to meet you. I've talked with you, Maynard, on the phone a lot, and it was really great to meet both of you. So, thank you so much for your time.
Well, thanks for coming to Washington State, and you guys are welcome back anytime to, hopefully come when it's not raining.
Yeah, come when there's cows on the field and not an inch of rain.
I know. So we may not be the smartest people when it comes to planning the times of year to go to places, but we only have so much time in our schedule, and it worked out in this time of the year. So